So we've been kicking around the idea of adding another project car to the fleet, which is probably not the best idea since we're already working too hard. But
very true, but we need something domestic.
Yeah, we feel like we're
tossing that idea around.
That's
guys. Right.
So we thought, the new Mustang is a great looking car, and we were both intrigued by the EcoBoost model.
Yeah, turbo 4-cylinder. Why not? We love it.
Exactly. We both kind of come from a tuner background, so the turbo 4 is an appealing idea. So we thought, let's grab one. We'll grab a press car. We'll go try it out at the track and see how we like it. And to make things even more interesting, we thought, you know what? Let's grab the V8 GT Model 2 because, hey.
Yeah, in my opinion, you never know, right? The V8 might be the way to go versus the 4-cylinder. Like, it's easy to add a blower onto that thing, make a gangload of horsepower, and all of a sudden you have a really fast car versus taking a 4-cylinder turbo, spending 20 grand to get close to the V8 Mustang price tag, and having what, 500?
Yeah. I mean, the price differential is a big one. I was kind of shocked to see that
Me too.
The V8 GT model that we tested was like 55 grand Canadian, I think 45 grand US.
Yeah.
Where the EcoBoost was like 35 Canadian or 30 US.
$20,000 is a lot.
It's a big difference. So I mean, if you think you take that 20 grand and put it into the EcoBoost model, man, you'd probably be quite a lot faster than the GT.
And I mean, you can put some of that into suspension work, brakes, all that.
Exactly. All the stuff we would do, we would, I think, almost inevitably be faster than the GT. But anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
That's right.
I guess the point is, we got both of these cars, we took them to the track, and really our mindset was, let's decide if one of these is a good addition to our project car fleet, and which one we would want to start with as the basis of a project car, really. Which one seems like the better starting point for what we do here, which is put performance parts on cars.
Something like that.
So that's exactly what we did, and I think both cars were surprising in some ways. I was surprised initially. I picked up the GT model first and street drove that thing, and oh my god, the V8 makes a ton of power.
It does, and I obviously started off with the 4-cylinder and then getting into the V8. I mean, it's just such a linear, smooth engine, and the power delivery, you could see that chassis was built for V8, right?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it overpowers the car. It's hard to use 450
does smoke those tires so well. I mean, it's fun, but
it
can be dangerous.
The line lock feature, but it has a line lock feature to smoke the rear tires. But that power is addictive, and it's available all the time in any gear. So instant performance. The EcoBoost was surprisingly quick to me. I mean, I thought, considering that it's a 3,500 pound car, is 310 horsepower going to feel kind of anemic? And I was impressed by the mid-range.
Yeah, to me it was acceptable. I still wanted a little bit more. My problem is I'm used to high revving Japanese engines that kind of deliver all their power up top, and I thought the 4-cylinder turbo would bring that sort of power delivery, but it's kind of the opposite, right? Where there's this fat mid-range band of power where all the torque hits and everything, but it falls off. And we learned that at the racetrack even more so, right?
Yeah, it really does fall off at around 5,500.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
it feels forever. It's like, oh my god, to hit red line just takes so long.
There's nothing happening on the top there, so...
Which is fair, though.
Yeah.
We shouldn't say it's a bad thing, because at the end of the day, that car was designed to be driven around, not on a racetrack for the most part. So you want to have that instant torque. You want a turbo that spools quickly, and you can't have a turbo that spools quickly but makes good top end power, right?
Yeah, and I think there's other considerations there as far as emissions and all that stuff.
Of course, but gas mileage, all that.
Yeah, but in any case, I thought it was interesting to learn on the track that you needed to not rev it out. That you needed to short shift it basically and use the torque instead of the horsepower. So forget the top end on that car.
Which is the opposite of what I was used to doing, and it was frustrating for me because I drove the car and I was like, wow, where's the power I need to constantly downshift to get more out of it, and I wasn't getting it.
Yeah. Once I started to leave it in a gear higher than I would normally, the lap times dropped significantly, like by 2 seconds, I think.
Which was really impressive.
It was surprising to see how quick it was once we figured out that, okay, we just need to use the torque.
Yeah.
Where the V8 model is the opposite. That motor is built to rev. That thing revs to 7K, and it makes tremendous power on the top end. So you drive it like you would naturally want to drive it. Use all of the rev.
It feels like a real sports car engine, right?
It does. But the handling didn't really feel like a real sports car to me. I know
me neither, but
it just understeered so much. It was surprising. They went with a staggered wheel and tire setup, so 255s in the front, 275s in the rear.
And the Mustang has a square setup, if I'm not
The
mistaken.
EcoBoost has a square
Sorry,
setup.
so the EcoBoost.
255s front and rear.
Yeah.
And so to me, the EcoBoost felt really balanced. It didn't have a lot of understeer on turn-in.
Very neutral.
Very neutral.
Yeah.
And then the V8 model had this push, front-end push, a lot of understeer. If you got aggressive on corner entry, it would just wash out. So you'd have to take a much more...
And then you get it back on the gas, and all of a sudden it wants to bring it around, which is, again, fun. We love that, but from a track standpoint of setting fast lap times, not the best.
Yeah, well, I don't think it was... Honestly, I think they set it up that way for safety, basically.
I agree,
The car is so
100%,
fast.
yeah.
Let's give this car some understeer so people don't drive it off the road kind of idea.
Precisely, and I think to no fault to Ford, because, you know, there's so many journalists and everybody that complain, oh, the car plows and you know, doesn't want to come around and oversteer so well. It's like, well, yeah, because most of us will go out and kill ourselves on the road.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Or at least, you know.
And I think it's an easy fix. All you do is put 275s on the front of that car.
Yeah.
And it would have the front end bite that it needs, and it would have that square setup, much like the EcoBoost.
Which would be a really cool test to do.
It would be a cool test to do, so maybe that's something we get a chance to do in the future. But that to me was like the big handling difference, was just that push versus the EcoBoost being better balanced. But the weight difference is big too. The V8 model weighs 200 pounds more than the EcoBoost, and that's
which is significant, especially where some of it is over the front axle.
Over the front end, so that's contributing to that understeer as well, right? Yeah. I mean, with the V8, you can kick the rear end out with power, but if you're trying to drive it in a balanced way, it just doesn't want to turn that much. So
it's definitely difficult.
That's to me the only drawback to that car. But we're going to modify it if we bought one anyway.
Precisely,
and it would be an easy fix.
So, what'd you think of the interior?
Interiors were nice. I thought I started with the GT, which has the nicer interior. It has like the leather Recaros. It has the big fancy sat-nav display in the center console, which was also linked into a fancy audio system, which was really good.
It's odd because I actually preferred the cloth Recaros.
I like them for comfort, but the leather looks more upscale. It
definitely does look upscale. I agree with you on that, yeah.
So when you get into it, it feels maybe more like a $50,000 car, where the EcoBoost felt a bit
Fair
cheaper.
enough, that's a good point.
It had the smaller screen with all those buttons.
Yeah, I was kind of disappointed in that. It kind of brought me back to like Mazda 3 days with the tiny little LCD.
Screen, yeah.
Like who needs a dial pad these days in a car?
It's weird to see a dial pad. I was like, what are all these numbers in here for? It actually took me a minute to figure out what it was for.
Kind of puzzling.
Yeah. I mean, some of the plastics inside are on the cheap side, but I like the design overall. I think it's a better design than the previous gen.
Oh, I think it's a huge step over the previous generation. And,
yeah.
You know, the overall interior, again, you know, you're not buying a luxury automobile here, so I don't want to complain about it at all, because at the end of the day, for me, you know, you're paying for something else than getting the premium touch feel of an interior that a $50,000, $60,000 Lexus has, right?
If you're an interior guy, you're going to go buy an Audi or a BMW anyway. If you're a Mustang guy, this interior is a step up from before. I liked being in the car. I thought the driving position was really good.
Yeah.
You know, you're like all modern cars, the waistline's pretty high, so you don't have great visibility out of it.
That was
the hood, I thought.
Yeah, that was a huge complaint for me personally. I had, once you get into that car, I don't want to say it feels claustrophobic, but because of the high hood line, man, it's kind of difficult to judge how big the vehicle is. I have a tiny little garage that I have to park the car into, and it was daunting. It was like the old 5-point turn.
Yeah, right? It is a big car. I mean, when I parked it in my garage, it has a bigger footprint than my Acura MDX SUV.
Yeah.
It's a big car. I mean, that was to me the surprising part about it. It looks so good. It's so low. It's so wide.
You're right. Yeah.
But it's big. It's a physically very large car.
And that to me, I think, was both of us. We thought that was one of the most surprising things, is how just the sheer size of this vehicle and the weight, obviously, right?
Yeah, the weight is a big concern. I mean, we were talking earlier about how one of the things that this car just didn't do for us was it doesn't have that immediate responsiveness of a lighter car like the S2000 or like our FRS.
Exactly, and we're used
spoiled by that feeling.
We almost are, you know. For me, like driving the S2000 now is just such a benchmark for performance and fun and ease of usability, that getting into a car like that, you know, just showed me, wow, where cars have gone and how heavy they are. Like, you know, you strip 500 pounds out of that EcoBoost Mustang, and I think it would be an absolute riot.
Yeah, it would be a rocket ship at that weight. And, you know, there will be guys who take weight out of it. I'm sure there's
but you lose, you know, that's what I mean. Then it kind of turns into a race car, where an S2000 or FRS it has that lightness already from the factory.
Fair enough.
So, but that's what we like.
Yeah.
For the most part, because we're used to the old Japanese tuning cars, like you said.
Yeah, and you know what? To be fair, I had a 3,500 pound Infiniti G35, and I really enjoyed that car. And to me, the EcoBoost reminded me more of the G35, maybe because it's about the same weight. It had that same sort of well-balanced feel. So as much as I like the power of the GT, the EcoBoost to me felt like a more driver's car because it would have that better sense of balance.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know, that's kind of the impression I got from it. Didn't love the gearbox though. The EcoBoost gearbox to me is pretty notchy.
See, again, I feel coming from a lot of Japanese cars, especially. I hate referencing the S2000, but that's what I've been driving a lot. Like that gearbox is just so precise and rose through the gears so well. And then you get into that car, and even the clutch, I was like, wow, it's so springy. It pops up just in a very inorganic manner. Where I find the cars that we're used to driving, it's just like pinpoint accuracy, precision with the gearbox.
Yeah, the V8 gearbox, the Getrag, the V8 was really good.
And
so that's maybe,
assumably so, right?
Yeah, for 55 grand, you're going to get a nicer gearbox. Yeah. So I mean, to me, the only thing I didn't like about the EcoBoost was probably the gearbox. Just felt like it was not that precise.
Yeah. So one thing I really liked was the gauge display on that Mustang. Man, it had all these awesome settings that you can go to that will show you air-fuel ratio, cylinder head temperature, oil temperature. So the days of having gauges all up on your dashboard are kind of gone. And kudos to Ford for doing that in my books. Like that's some really good information to have.
It was cool. I mean, the vacuum gauge in the GT was kind of funny to see. They were like filling a hole in the dashboard. The boost gauge for the EcoBoost is.
Exactly. So the EcoBoost model has a boost gauge there, and they were just like, all right, well, let's pop this vacuum gauge into the
GT. Yeah, it was kind of funny, but I love the performance mode in that central dash too, where
I think the V8 has a track mode, right? So it has a lot of.
Yeah.
But actually, no, I shouldn't say that because the EcoBoost also has the accelerometer.
Yeah, the G-graph and all that stuff. And I think the GT has a few other features that the EcoBoost didn't have that way.
I think the track mode is.
Right. So there was some stuff there that you could do. And the GT model had a bunch of features that you could control with those toggle switches that the EcoBoost didn't have.
Correct.
So like track mode, there was like a weather mode, sport mode, and a normal mode.
Yep.
And it had some other stuff you could control there as well. So the GT is a little bit more upscale as far as the electronics, or the driver aids that are in there.
Yep.
Which we eventually figured out how to turn off with the track.
We did struggle with that for a bit, but that's just because we're kind of noobs.
Yeah, we're not Mustang ninjas, so
we're not used to having aids at the track. We drive these cars without any type of control.
Right. Get all that shit out.
That's right.
So yeah, maybe let's jump back to the track for a sec. But before we do, why don't we touch on the fact that both cars were equipped with the performance pack?
Right, and we should mention the brakes on those performance packs.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Very touchy on the street.
Too touchy.
I mean, you could just barely breathe on the brakes.
Yeah, and it was like neck snapping, which I still didn't get used to after driving it. Like obviously, I became more aware of it, but there were moments like if you're napping and all of a sudden you got to touch the brake pedal, bam!
Yeah, it's kind of embarrassing when you're pulling up a stop sign like this.
It's like you're listening to heavy metal.
Yeah. But on the track, they worked exceptionally well.
Exactly. And
it's rare to have a factory setup with zero brake fade. I don't know about you, but I never got the brakes fading at all.
No, me neither. And the Mustang comes with, non-Brembo equipped brakes, although I suspect they're Brembo-ish. They're just not labeled or painted. Or
the EcoBoost has a non-branded
but
I think it's still a Brembo caliper.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. So, but I get it. Save a couple bucks here and there with not put the fancy Brembos on, but the performance is still there and the function.
Yeah, the EcoBoost with the performance pack gets the 4-pot calipers off the regular GT.
Oh, okay.
And then the GT with the performance pack gets a 6-pot branded Brembo caliper.
That makes sense.
So that's kind of how that food chain works.
Yeah.
Anyway, the brakes were really
Both
good.
cars, in my opinion, excellent.
Very aggressive brake pad, which to me on the street wasn't great, but at the track was awesome. So, what else comes with the performance pack? Well, you can look that up online, but it's got stiffer springs, stiffer bushings,
lower ride
height, bigger wheels and tires, Pirelli P0, so it's the Pirelli P0 summer tire, which is a pretty good summer tire. It's not my favorite, but as far as an OEM tire goes, it's actually quite good.
For a Ford Mustang,
it's a pretty.
You asked me 10 years ago if you'd see a P0 on a Mustang, you kind of shake your head.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's a great point. There's some small stylistic differences too. Like the GT model has a like a diffuser, split diffuser on the back.
Yeah, yeah.
A bit more aggressive
Splitter.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
The side skirts are the same, but those small styling cues do give the GT I think at least a more aggressive look.
Oh, I agree. I think the GT looks better with those for sure. I wonder if, I guess it could be fit onto the EcoBoost.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
I'm sure there's guys
for sure.
doing that
Yeah,
already.
you can do that. Why not?
So,
the grills are a little bit different. Like there's small minor differences. But all right, we're getting off track again. Back to the racetrack.
The track. All right. So the lap times. The GT model did a 1:22 flat, which is actually a really good lap time around
Very
that
good.
track.
Yeah. For a Mustang too, man.
That's a
super
benchmark.
impressive.
I think I did a 1:21.5 in the Boss 302 last year.
Okay.
And this car, the GT, was benchmarked against that. And we had that big puddle in the chicane that you'll see in the video. So I think without that puddle, it would have been right on the lap time of the Boss. Which is pretty damn good.
Really good.
Yeah.
Considering the Boss is built to be a track car. Right?
Yeah, and this doesn't have the pointiness of the Boss. You know, the Boss was really willing to rotate, and it had a square wheel and tire package.
Yeah.
This car with the Boss wheel and tire package, man, it would be really dialed in. So, sort of believer that point. But I want to hammer that home.
Yeah.
Put bigger tires on the front of that thing. Ford,
come on, get to it, or we'll do it for you.
Exactly.
And show you that it's so much
People are
better.
already doing it, I'm sure. Yeah. We'll do it anyway. EcoBoost did a 1:24.2.
Yes.
Which is actually really impressive. It was only 2 seconds slower than the GT, and I think that's the fastest 4-cylinder turbo lap time I've ever done in a press car at that track.
No kidding, wow.
Yeah, so it was faster than the Focus ST, faster than the Genesis 2.8T, you know, faster than the Golf R, like faster than all the small turbo cars I've ever tried there.
That's really impressive, and I guess it wouldn't be hard to turn up the boost. I'm sure the aftermarket will be playing with that.
I'm sure it already is, and I mean, in fact, I saw something recently from MA Performance where their EcoBoost is making 500 at the wheel.
Holy smokes!
It's like a world record for that car right now.
Wow!
I think it's a full turbo upgrade, you know, manifold, all that good stuff. But even basic bolt-ons are responding really well on that car. I think you saw that K&N press
release.
I
think it was around 12, 13 wheel horsepower, which is impressive. And to me, that car, if you can get it up to 350, maybe 400, it would be excellent. Such a fast car. And, open up the intake. Open up the exhaust, get it to breathe a little better, make a little bit more power at the top.
End alive.
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be huge on that car. That would give it a lot more character.
And to me, doing that, not spending a lot of money, is almost the better way to go than building a 500 wheel horsepower monster, which has its own problems inherently.
I'm sure it does. Yeah, just doing the basic bolt-ons on that car would be fun to do though, and that's
kind of where we're at, right?
That's kind of one of the considerations for sure. I mean. The suspension was an interesting one for me too. The car has now, as everybody knows, it has an independent rear suspension, which is a big change from the old solid rear axle days. and yet, to me, I didn't notice a big difference. Well, on the street, I didn't notice a big difference. It seems like it's kind of a busy ride on the street, to be honest. I was surprised how firm it is.
I agree with you on that. Yep.
It's
the track package, I'm sure.
Yeah, that
adds
contributes
to that.
So I don't want to be too harsh on that. But at the track, it was really good. There's a better sense of the front and rear axles being connected and wanting to work together with the IRS, where to me, in say the Boss or even the old V6 track pack car that I tried, you feel the rear end moving around a lot.
Yeah, you get that kind of like disconnect, that slop, and you're like, okay, I can manage this, make it work.
Yeah, where these cars don't have that anymore. So there is a better connection happening there, but it's not a quantum leap. I mean, Ford had the old rear axle.
I agree with you. I think it's just they had to go to it because,
modern
it's 2015 and who runs a solid axle in the rear? Right?
Yeah, and I think it'll pay dividends for the tuner guys too, or the racer guys who want to go faster, who want to run.
That's very true. Yeah.
The race guys will probably love it too. So I was surprised that it wasn't like a massive difference, at least in terms of ride quality, but I think it's a step in the right direction anyway. So I'm not going to complain about having an independent rear suspension.
Sure.
Other than that, man, I mean, to me the big takeaway was it's a big car, it's a fairly heavy car.
So we know it's big.
Yeah.
Yeah. And performance-wise on the track,
it was excellent.
It was excellent.
For a stock car, they were both excellent.
Yeah.
So I think
that's a plus for us.
For a track day car, I think it's a really good starting point for that. I just don't know if I love it enough to want to buy one though.
I'll admit, I was all for Dave getting one, but after driving it on the racetrack, and again, going back to the size, I don't know. I think there's better options for us out there terms of project cars, even building an older pony car, I'm now leaning more towards that than getting this. Like, yeah, this is new. There's a ton of potential to make a bunch of powered bolt-ons and see how fast we can go with it. But at the same time, I'm like, man, you know, buying I don't even know what gen it is, but a $15,000, yeah, a $15,000 V8 Mustang, and then putting some mods and money into that, you could probably go pretty damn fast.
You could, and it's a lighter car, partly because of that solid rear axle. But yeah, there's a certain temptation to going with a previous gen Mustang because it's a simpler car, it's a cheaper car.
Yeah.
There's a massive aftermarket. There's probably a bigger aftermarket for that car than any other car in the world. So we could have a lot of fun with one of those for very little money compared to the cost of one of these. So it's a temptation, but there's also a lot of other interesting options out there. Like a 350Z is an intriguing option to me.
True, yeah.
An E46 M3. I just bumped into a guy with a competition pack E46 M3 for sale, and it's mint condition.
See, the problem with those cars is they're so good out of the box. You go buy that, and then what do you do to it? You know?
Yeah, that's true.
You put a supercharger on it, and you're ready to go. We want a tinker.
What about a C6 Z06?
Oh, see, I would like that.
You can get those for not much more money than an EcoBoost Mustang.
That's a really cool car.
Lots to consider.
Well, you guys should maybe give us some suggestions. Yeah. I don't know if we'll.
We may not listen to you, but
we definitely would love to hear that.
Yeah, so I think the idea of a Mustang in our fleet is intriguing because we haven't done a domestic build. So, if not the Mustang, let us know what domestic maybe we should consider building.
Yeah, and maybe if Ford's listening, you want to give us a car for 6 months to build.
We can build you a fast EcoBoost, guys.
There you go.
There you go. Let's make it happen.
Like maybe put it in a track mode, then turn it off?
Okay, yeah.
But that's...
So track mode. Okay. I'll change the steering.
See, now it's blinking. Now watch. It'll do it this way now. There we go.
So hit okay.
Now I guarantee you now it's fine.
You got the AC off?
AC off, yeah.
Alright, try again.
Okay. So